My name is Isabella Hayes. I'm 21 and I thought I was invisible to my own family. After my mom died, I spent years holding us together until my dad told me to just disappear. What they didn't know was that I had proof of something bigger. My uncle's scheme, my sister's future on the line, and a truth that would shatter our family dinner. Before I tell you how it all unfolded, let me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever been erased by your own family, hit that like and subscribe button. When I was little, my father used to call me his shadow. Wherever he went, I followed. To the grocery store, to the hardware shop, even when he mowed the lawn on Saturday mornings, I was right there tagging along, pretending I was helping. He would laugh, ruffle my hair, and say, "That's my Izzy always by my side." I used to carry those words like armor, as if they could protect me from every unkind glance at school, every lonely night after Mom's passing. But somewhere along the line, that shadow stopped being a comfort. It started feeling like a stain one he wanted to scrub out of his life. When Mom died, it was just the three of us, Dad, Maddie, and me, grasping at routines to keep us afloat. We burned through frozen dinners and tearful movie nights pretending we were normal. I clung to that sense of team. I thought we're broken, but at least we're broken together. For a while, Maddie still slipped into my bed on stormy nights. She would fall asleep, clutching my arm, whispering, "Don't leave me, Izzy." I swore I never would. Back then, she believed me. Back then, Dad looked at me with a kind of weary gratitude, like he knew I was the glue holding us together. Then Caroline arrived. She came with perfume that smelled like lilacs, bright scarves knotted effortlessly around her neck, and a laugh that felt rehearsed. At first, I tried to welcome her. I told myself Dad deserved to be happy, that maybe she'd fill a little of the hollow space Mom had left behind. But with me, there was always a thin layer of frost beneath the warmth. Caroline had a way of tilting her head, smiling sweetly while her eyes measured and filed every word I spoke. Maddie fell for her instantly. She started mimicking Caroline's style, her phrases, even the way she folded napkins at dinner. Dad, too, seemed lighter around her, as if she was oxygen and the rest of us were stale air. That's when the slow erasure began. It started with interruptions. My stories about school or work cut short because Caroline had a funny anecdote to share. My suggestions during family talks brushed aside with Izzy, "Don't be so dramatic." Maddie began rolling her eyes when I spoke, parroting Caroline's little phrases. Dad would chuckle along. I learned to fall quiet, to fold my napkins neatly, to swallow words before they could embarrass me. But silence only made me more invisible. I buried myself in my part-time job at the bookstore, where the smell of paper and coffee was gentler than home. I pulled long hours studying, convinced that good grades would prove I was worth listening to. Instead, Maddie started accusing me of acting superior. Dad nodded along. Caroline would smooth things over always with that same smile, like a teacher indulging a stubborn child. One evening, I lingered in the living room after dinner, staring at the wall of family photos. There we were, camping trips, birthdays, my middle school graduation with my crooked braces, grin. They told the story of a family that had survived something together. Caroline stepped in behind me and said almost casually, "You know, maybe it's time we update these." Too much clutter, don't you think? She didn't say erase. But that's what it felt like. Later, I overheard Maddie in her room on the phone whispering, "Izzy just thinks she's better than everyone. Dad sees it too." My chest tightened. I wanted to burst in to remind her of those stormy nights when she begged me not to leave her, but I stayed frozen outside her door. It was like watching my sister slowly drift into someone else's orbit, one I couldn't reach. Even Dad changed. When Maddie snapped at me, he shrugged it off. When Caroline sighed at my attitude, he looked at me like I was the problem. The same man who once called me his shadow now acted as if my presence cast darkness on everything he touched. So, I adapted. I shrank myself, thinking if I just stayed small enough, quiet enough, they'd let me belong again. But the truth gnawed at me late at night. When the house was too quiet, I was already being pushed out one subtle shove at a time, and I held on, telling myself it was just a rough patch that families bend before they break. But looking back now, I realized the bending had already ended. Cracks had already spiderwebbed across the surface. And I was the only one pretending not to see them. That's why when Dad's voice finally lashed out at me across the dinner table when he spat the words, "Why don't you just disappear?" It didn't feel sudden. It felt like the echo of every silence, every eye roll, every smile that wasn't meant for me. And for the first time, I listened. The unraveling of that week didn't happen in one explosion. It was a slow boil, the kind that simmers until you don't realize the pot is burning, until smoke fills the room. It began on Monday when Dad called a family meeting. The words used to mean something Mom, gathering us in the living room with cocoa mugs, making sure even Maddie's voice counted. But this time, Caroline perched on the arm of Dad's chair like she had earned a permanent seat in the circle. Maddie sprawled on the couch, arms crossed, phone glowing in her lap. The topic, Maddie's grades. Her math teacher had emailed about missing assignments. Dad cleared his throat. Caroline patted his knee encouragingly, and Maddie rolled her eyes as though the world had no right to expect effort from her. "I could help," I said carefully. "Just a couple hours after school, stop pretending you care," Maddie snapped, cutting me off. "You're just looking for another reason to boss me around." Her words landed sharper than she knew. I'd spent months offering her rides, helping her with projects, staying up to proofread essays when Dad forgot. I opened my mouth to remind her, but Dad leaned back with a weary sigh. "Maybe give your sister some space, Izzy," he said. Caroline sipped her tea, eyes down, lips twitching at the corners. That was worse than any insult, her quiet agreement. By Wednesday, the air in the house was thick with resentment. I walked into the kitchen after school to find dishes stacked in the sink, crusted with leftovers. Maddie was on the couch scrolling her phone with both thumbs. "Can you at least rinse these so I can load the dishwasher?" I asked, keeping my voice even. She clattered plates into the sink, exaggerated like each clink was an accusation. "Happy now, Mom." The word cut deep. I wasn't her mother. I wasn't trying to be. I just wanted a little order in a house that had lost all of it. But before I could reply, Dad came in tugging off his jacket. "Ease up, Izzy," he said. "She's had a hard day. It was always Maddie's hard day, never mine." Something small cracked inside me then. Nothing dramatic, just the sound of a rope fraying one fiber at a time. By Friday, Caroline suggested a reset, a family dinner downtown at an Italian place Dad liked. Fresh start, she called it, as if pasta and candlelight could erase months of contempt. I agreed, half hoping she was right. Maybe we could breathe. We sat at a round table with flickering candles and thick breadsticks wrapped in linen. For a moment, I let myself believe we might laugh again. But Maddie's phone was already in her hand screen, lighting her face like a shrine. "Maddie," I said gently, "no phones at dinner. Dad's rule, remember." She didn't look up. "I'm in the middle of something." "You can finish it later," I murmured, trying not to make a scene. That's when Dad's fork clinked against his plate. "Izzy, she's not a child. Let her be." I should have let it go. I could have swallowed the words like I'd swallowed 100 others, but the week's worth of cracks finally splintered. "You set this rule, Dad?" I said, my voice sharper than I meant. "No phones at dinner. Remember." Maddie smirked like she'd been waiting for this exact cue. Her eyes glittered in the low light as she leaned back and said almost lazily, "Why don't you just disappear?" The words floated in the air, sticky, poisonous, but not fatal. Not yet. What killed me was what came next. Dad didn't hesitate, didn't even glance at me with the faintest trace of defense. He looked straight into my eyes and said, "Yeah, maybe we would be better off without you." The restaurant hummed with background chatter, forks scraping, glasses clinking. But at our table, silence detonated. Caroline's smile froze mid-expression. Maddie blinked like even she hadn't expected him to go that far. My own hands felt too heavy to move. So I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I pushed back my chair. The dull scrape against tile sounded louder than any words I could have spoken. I stood, placed my napkin on the table, and walked out. No one followed. The night air hit me cold, sharper than I remembered. My boots thudded against the sidewalk as I moved each step, pounding with the realization this wasn't the start of anything. This was the ending I had been trying not to see. I didn't drive home. I drove to Naomi's. She didn't ask questions, didn't press me. She just left a blanket folded on the couch and a glass of water on the table as if she'd been preparing for this night without knowing it. I curled up coat still on staring at the muted TV until infomercials blurred into static. The next morning, sunlight spilled through Naomi's gauzy curtains, softer than home. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. 13 missed calls, 8 from Dad, 5 from Maddie. My thumb hovered over the voicemail icon, but I couldn't press it. Not yet. Because deep down, I already knew last night wasn't the breaking point. It was just the moment the fracture finally split wide open. Naomi's spare blanket still smelled faintly of lavender detergent when I woke up again. My head ached like I'd been clenching my jaw all night, and the weight of those 13 missed calls sat heavier than the blanket itself. I didn't check the voicemails. I couldn't. Some part of me already knew they weren't apologies. They'd be justifications, guilt trips, or worse, silence on the line waiting for me to fold. By mid-morning, I told Naomi I needed to stop by the house. "You want me to come with?" she asked, brows furrowed. I shook my head. No. If I walk in with backup, they'll just twist it into more drama. I need to do this alone. She didn't like it, but she let me go, pressing a travel mug of coffee into my hand like armor. The driveway looked the same as always. Dad's truck gone, Caroline's silver sedan parked neatly like it hadn't moved in days. But the second I stepped inside, my stomach turned. The living room wall had changed. It used to be crowded with photos layered with overlapping frames of every birthday, every camping trip, every holiday. A messy shrine to years we couldn't get back. Now, gaps yawned where certain photos had hung. I stepped closer. The family trip to Colorado still there, but my body had been cut out, leaving a hollow space between Dad and Maddie as if I'd never been there. My high school graduation photo gone. The one where Mom's face was brighter than the sun because she'd lived to see it that too erased. Even the silly 4x6 from the county fair where Maddie and I clutched matching stuffed bears had been trimmed, so it looked like she'd won alone. My chest burned. I whispered to the empty room, "What the hell?" That's when Caroline appeared in the doorway holding a laundry basket like a prop. She froze for a second, caught, but quickly pasted on that smile. "Izzy, you're home." "Not for long," I said flatly. "Where are the photos?" Her smile tightened. "Your father thought it might be best given how tense things have been. Best for who my voice cracked sharper than I wanted." She shifted the basket, avoiding my eyes. "We're just trying to make things easier." Before I could press further, a vibration hummed from the hallway. My old bedroom. I followed the sound and found my desk drawer half open. The jewelry box Mom gave me for my 16th birthday lay tipped over. 2 of her rings, the ones she wore every day of her life, were missing. I spun around. "Caroline, where are my things?" She barely blinked. "You'll have to ask your father." Then her phone buzzed and she ducked her head. "Excuse me, I have to take this." Her voice dropped to a whisper as she disappeared down the hall. I stood in the ruins of my old room, scanning every corner like answers might crawl out of the carpet. My phone buzzed again. A new text from Mrs. Whitaker next door. "Saw a man at your place last night after you left. Tall, dark jacket. Thought it was your uncle." Uncle, I didn't have one. At least, not one who visited. A chill ran up my spine. When I got back to Naomi's, she had 2 mugs of tea waiting and her laptop open. She didn't bother with small talk. "You're not going to like this," she said. "I ran into someone today. Said he was your uncle. Jonathan Hayes. Tall, dark jacket, salt and pepper hair. The name hit like ice water. Jonathan, my father's younger brother. The man who'd vanished from our lives when I was barely 10. I remembered the screaming matches, the slammed doors, Mom's hushed voice saying, "He's not safe, Izzy. Don't ask." "What did he want?" I asked carefully. Naomi frowned. "He said he had a business opportunity for your dad and Maddie. Asked if you still lived at home." I didn't tell him anything, but Izzy, he gives me the creeps. I pulled out my phone, fingers trembling, and typed his name. It didn't take long. Local news 5 years ago, Jonathan Hayes accused of defrauding relatives in an investment scheme. Tens of thousands gone. The case settled quietly, but the damage etched in ink. So why was he back now? I scrolled further. A social media page recently updated plastered with motivational quotes about family wealth and trusting your blood, and in the comments I froze. Maddie's profile picture liking nearly every post. "She's following him," I whispered. Naomi leaned over. "He's not just after your dad, he's targeting her." As if to confirm it, my phone buzzed again. This time from Dad. "We're having dinner with Jonathan tomorrow night. I think it's time you bury the hatchet." Bury the hatchet. The phrase made bile rise in my throat. This wasn't about forgiveness. This was about pulling me into whatever scam he was spinning. I typed back one word, maybe. Then I tossed the phone onto Naomi's couch and looked at her. "If I'm going to that dinner, I need to know exactly what he's up to before I walk through that door." Her eyes narrowed fierce in a way that always meant trouble for someone else. "Then we've got work to do." That night, Naomi's dining table transformed into our war room. Her laptop glowed in the center, surrounded by my notepad, half-drained mugs, and piles of old photo albums like evidence files. "Here's what I found," Naomi said, swiveling the laptop toward me. "A list of business registrations under Jonathan Hayes, 7 in total. All dissolved or flagged as suspicious. Auto-detailing real estate flipping luxury vacation rentals, everyone shuttered in under 2 years. Lawsuits in 3 states, 1 civil suit from a family in Ohio who accused him of draining their daughter's college fund." My stomach dropped. Maddie's college savings. Dad had kept them in a joint account. If Jonathan got her to sign anything? Naomi's voice cut in low and certain. "Izzy, if he gets his hands on her money, it's gone before she even applies to college." I pressed my palms into my eyes until I saw stars. He wasn't just erasing me from the photos. He was erasing Maddie's future. And no matter how much they wanted me to disappear, I couldn't let that happen. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jonathan's face from those grainy news clippings, half smile, half predator's smirk, as though he was calculating how much I was worth before deciding whether to cut me out. The hum of Naomi's laptop in the next room was the only sound steady enough to anchor me. By morning, she had turned her dining table into something that looked less like a kitchen and more like a war desk. Her laptop sat in the center, surrounded by half-drunk coffee mugs, yellow sticky notes scrawled with dates, lawsuits, dollar amounts. She waved me over, hair pulled into a messy bun that told me she hadn't slept either. "Look," she said. 7 businesses under Jonathan Hayes. Every single one dissolved. Every single one either settled out of court or collapsed under debt. He's recycling the same pattern recruiting family, promising double returns, vanishing when it all crumbles. I rubbed my temples. And now it's Maddie. Naomi clicked to another tab. A bank record. 2 weeks ago, he opened a new account under Family Futures LLC. Just him on the account. Not your dad, not Maddie, just Jonathan. The bile rose in my throat. Then why is Dad texting me about burying the hatchet? Why is he letting Jonathan pitch this at dinner like it's some kind of family reunion? Naomi's voice softened. "Because he wants to believe him. People like Jonathan prey on that they sell nostalgia. They make you think they're restoring something you've lost." I thought of Maddie's Instagram story the night before college brochures spread across her desk with the caption, "Big changes ahead." It wasn't just nostalgia. Jonathan was dangling a future in front of her, and she was reaching for it with both hands. I couldn't sit and wait. If Jonathan wanted a stage at tomorrow's dinner, then I'd be ready with a spotlight. That afternoon, Naomi and I drove into town. Jonathan had rented an office in a crumbling building on Main Street. Through dusty blinds, we saw him pacing with a phone pressed to his ear, gesturing wildly as though sealing a deal. The office itself looked staged: one desk, one fake plant, a stack of glossy folders. Smoke and mirrors. At one point, he pulled open a drawer and lifted out a thick manila folder with color-coded dividers. Even from across the street, I recognized that style. Dad used the same ones for household documents. Naomi lifted her phone, snapping photos, zooming in. "If he's already using your dad's files as bait, this could be our proof." I nodded, though my hands trembled. For every photo we took, I pictured Maddie's face if she knew we were tailing the man she'd started to idolize. I wanted to protect her, but a bitter voice whispered, "Why should you?" Didn't she want you gone? I shoved the thought down. Protecting her wasn't about whether she deserved it. It was about not letting Jonathan finish what he started years ago. By dusk, the office lights clicked off and Jonathan walked out carrying the folder. We stayed low in Naomi's car as he climbed into a shiny black SUV, pulling away with the kind of confidence that comes from believing you're untouchable. Naomi exhaled, finally lowering her phone. "Tomorrow night isn't a dinner, Izzy. It's a setup." The words rang in my chest. A setup. Back at her apartment, I stared at the ceiling long after midnight. Every creak in the pipes, every passing car outside made me think of how easily Jonathan had already slipped back into our lives, how fast he'd erased me from family photos, and how quickly Maddie had let herself be folded into his story. Part of me wanted to storm into Dad's house that second, slam the folder on the table, and scream the truth until they couldn't ignore it anymore. But another part of me knew that shouting would only make me sound like the problem again. No. If Jonathan was going to play this game quietly behind closed doors, then so would I. But I'd make sure the doors I chose led him straight into a trap. The next morning, Dad texted again. "Dinner tonight? 7 p.m. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. He didn't say please. He didn't say we want you there. It wasn't an invitation. It was a command, and maybe once I would have obeyed. But this time I typed back, "Fine, I'll listen." Naomi looked at me when I told her. "You're really going?" "Yes," I said. "But not to make peace. To end this." She slid a small black recorder across the table. "Then, take this. If he's pitching a scam, get it on tape. Make it so clean the cops don't even have to try." I slipped it into my pocket, the weight small but heavy with possibility, as the day dragged on. A storm brewed in my chest. Every time I pictured Jonathan leaning across that dinner table, smirking, while Dad nodded and Maddie clutched a pen, my stomach twisted tighter. The power struggle had already begun. Jonathan thought he was pulling the strings. Dad thought he was keeping the family afloat. Maddie thought she was stepping into a brighter future. But tonight, for the first time in years, I wasn't just going to be the shadow. I was going to be the one who brought everything into the light. The restaurant smelled like garlic and red wine, so strong it nearly choked me when I walked in. Soft jazz drifted from hidden speakers. Glasses, clinked forks scraped across plates, and laughter from strangers filled the air. It should have felt warm, safe. Instead, every sound rang hollow like background noise to a play I wanted no part in. Dad spotted me first, waving me over to a round table in the back. Maddie sat between him and Jonathan, flipping nervously through a glossy folder I already knew wasn't a menu. Caroline perched next to Dad, smiling too brightly as though she could disguise the tension with charm. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, hands steepled, looking like a king at his throne. "Izzy," Jonathan said, flashing teeth in a grin too wide, too polished. "Glad you could join us. I've been telling your father it's time this family moved past old grudges. No point digging up the past, right?" I sat down slowly, forcing my hands to stay steady. "I'm here to listen." Dad's shoulders relaxed, as if my presence alone meant progress. Maddie gave me a small smile, almost relieved, and that nearly broke me. She trusted him. She trusted him more than me. The waitress appeared, took drink orders, and vanished into the hum of the restaurant. Then, Jonathan leaned forward, lowering his voice like he was sharing a secret meant only for us. "I've got something big," he said. "Something that could set this family up for life. Family Futures, LLC investments in cutting-edge green technology. Exclusive openings, limited seats, high returns you won't find online." He chuckled like the secrecy itself made it irresistible. "I want you all in. Family first." He slid the folder toward me. Inside were pages of projections in flashy colors, graphs climbing like mountains, and at the very back a contract. Maddie's name already typed at the top, a blank line waiting for Dad's signature. "See," Jonathan gestured proudly. "It's all here." Maddie glanced at me nervous. "It's just an investment, Izzy. Uncle Jonathan says it's guaranteed." I took a slow sip of water, letting silence stretch. Guaranteed. Like the real estate flip in Nevada or the vacation rentals in Ohio. Jonathan's grin faltered. Those were learning experiences. No, I said, pulling my phone from my pocket. My hands shook, but my voice stayed firm. They were lawsuits, settled in 3 states, families who lost their savings, college funds drained. Sound familiar? Dad frowned, his fork hovering midair. Izzy, Dad, listen. My voice broke, but I pushed through. He's not here to bring us together. He's here to take everything from Maddie, the same way he's taken from everyone else. Jonathan laughed brittle now, his teeth clenched. You've been snooping. Cute, but you don't understand business. Then explain this, I said, tapping the recorder in my pocket before sliding it onto the table. Why did Mrs. Whitaker see you at our house the night I left? Why were you getting Maddie to sign papers when Dad wasn't home? Maddie's face paled. Uncle Jonathan. Is that true? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for the folder, but I laid my hand on it first. Not tonight. That's when footsteps approached. 2 men in plain clothes emerged from the corner of the restaurant, badges glinting in the low light. Jonathan Hayes, one said firmly, flipping open his ID. Detective Lawson County Sheriff's Office. We need to talk about some financial activities you've been involved in. The second, a state investigator Naomi had tipped off, stepped forward and slid the glossy folder into an evidence bag. We'll take that. For the first time all night, Jonathan's composure cracked. He stood muttering about misunderstandings, but Lawson's hand landed on his shoulder before he could take a step. Dad's jaw dropped. Caroline's smile froze. Maddie's hands clenched tight in her lap. As they led Jonathan toward the door, he turned his head, eyes locking on Maddie. Sweetheart, don't let her turn you against me. I'm your family. Maddie's voice trembled, but it was steady enough to cut through the noise. She is too. The door closed behind him, and for a moment the whole restaurant seemed to exhale. The hum of clinking glasses returned, though softer, like the other diners weren't sure it was safe to resume. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding so hard it echoed in my ears. I turned to Dad, my voice barely above a whisper. I told you I was here to listen. I just wasn't listening to him. Dad rubbed his temples, eyes heavy with guilt. Maddie stared at the empty doorway, tears streaking her cheeks. And me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the shadow cast over this family. For the first time, I felt seen. 2 weeks later, the official letter arrived in a plain white envelope. Inside, stamped in black ink, were the words, State of Ohio versus Jonathan Hayes. Multiple counts of fraud. The detectives had called it ironclad, thanks to the folder seized at dinner and the recording I'd slipped onto the table. Dad read the letter 3 times at the kitchen counter before finally setting it down with a long, ragged sigh. His face looked older, lines etched deeper than I remembered. I should have known, he muttered. I should have never let him back in. I wanted to tell him, yes, you should have known, but the bitterness felt too heavy to throw at him now. Instead, I just said, what matters is you know now. The next morning, we drove together to the bank. Maddie sat in the back seat staring out the window with her headphones on silent but present. Dad asked to close the old joint account and move her college savings into a trust only she could access when she turned 18. He signed the papers without hesitation. This time, no folder from Jonathan guiding his pen, just a father finally doing right by his daughter. This is yours, he told Maddie, sliding the papers across the desk. No one touches it, not even me. Her smile was small but real. For the first time in months, she looked at him without resentment or blind faith. Just clarity. In the weeks that followed, the house shifted in small but important ways. The photos that had been cut, trimmed, or removed began reappearing on the living room wall. My graduation photo returned its frame dusted. The Colorado trip restored my figure taped carefully back into place. It was clumsy the way Dad had reinserted me, but it mattered more than I could admit aloud. Caroline moved out quietly one weekend. No big fight, no announcement. Just her silver sedan gone from the driveway, her perfume fading from the hallways. Dad never explained and I never asked. The silence itself was explanation enough. Maddie started coming into my room at night again, though not like before. She didn't curl up beside me the way she had when she was little. Instead, she'd sit cross-legged at the end of my bed, scrolling her phone, sometimes showing me a meme, sometimes just existing near me. At first, it felt awkward, like she was testing whether I'd push her away, but I didn't. I couldn't. One Friday night, Dad suggested we cook together. Spaghetti sauce, he said, almost sheepishly. The way your mom used to make it. We burned the garlic bread, oversalted the pasta, and laughed harder than we should have. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't meant to be. But it was ours. After dinner, Maddie grabbed her jacket and looked at me. Ice cream? She asked, voice hesitant like an olive branch held out between us. I blinked at her, then smiled. Yeah. The shop was still there, same neon sign buzzing faintly above the door, same owner behind the counter who remembered us instantly. You two again, he said, grinning. Haven't seen you since soccer season. You're the quiet one, right? He nodded at me. I laughed softly. Guess so. We sat at a corner table, Maddie with her Rocky Road me with mint chocolate chip the same as when we were kids. She leaned forward, spoon-tapping against her cup. You know, she said, voice trembling just slightly for a while, I thought family just meant blood. Who you're related to. But I think I get it now. I tilted my head. What do you mean? Her eyes glistened. Real family protects you, even if they have to protect you from your own blood. I swallowed hard, unable to speak. She clinked her spoon gently against mine in a tiny toast. Guess that makes you the real thing. The words burrowed into me warm and heavy, filling a space I hadn't realized was still hollow. Later that night, back in my room, I stared at the wall where my photos hung again. The cracks between us hadn't vanished. They probably never would. But for the first time, they didn't feel like fractures ready to shatter. They felt like seams stitched clumsily, but stitched nonetheless. Jonathan had tried to erase me from my own family, tried to make me disappear. But in the end, his schemes had done the opposite. He made my father see me again. He made Maddie remember who'd truly been there all along, and maybe, just maybe, that was the kind of justice Mom would have smiled at. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't fading. I wasn't the shadow. I was home. Have you ever felt erased by your own family, like your voice didn't matter until it was almost too late? Share your story in the comments, I'll be reading them. And if you want more stories like mine, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss the next chapter.